Hey there, it's Rachel Mullins, the host of Hashtag No Filter Fridays on Public House Media.
You're listening to Catch Up, an official news production of Public House Media.
Today is June 26, 2020, and it's time to catch up on the news that you need to know about.
Today we are helping you catch up on PGA Tour withdrawals due to the COVID pandemic,
Disney theme park delayed opening announcement,
3 men indicted on the death of Ahmaud Arbery,
and Brazil's new senior home has a hug tunnel.
We're your hosts, Madeline Kump
and Catherine Smith. Welcome to Catch Up.
As more and more participants have been seen to drop out of the running for the PGA Tour, can we expect the golfing season to remain competitive, or will this season be less eventful in comparison to the previous years?
It was announced yesterday that Brooks Koepka and Webb Simpson were the latest pro golfers to pull out of the PGA Tour event due to COVID-19 concerns, bringing a total of 5 to withdraw their participation from the Travelers Championship. Here to discuss this concerning decision is Catch Up News correspondent John Lauder. Thank you for joining us today, John.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the rave of the pandemic being all talked about in the world of sports, what can we expect out of the rest of the golfing season, especially within the realm of the PGA Tour?
Well, just like everything else, Catherine, it's just going to be a continuous issue, whether it be individual sports, team sports. We saw with tennis with Novak Djokovic and several other tennis players in the tournament over in Serbia testing positive just this past week as well. This is going to be a constant and continuous issue. And these sports are going to have to continuously, evaluate, make changes, and do the best they can to deal with COVID-19 and how it affects their particular sports. With the Travelers Championship coming up this weekend, also Cameron Champ, Graham McDowell, and Koepka's younger brother Chase were the other 3 to withdraw. The only one that's tested positive is Cameron Champ. The other ones have not tested positive. McDowell's caddy did, but not McDowell himself as of this moment. But this is just the way it's going to be in golf and every other sport. Individuals are going to test positive, and teams, leagues, individuals are going to have to take the proper steps to quarantine to try not to spread this further. And this is just going to be an issue that all sports are going to be dealing with for the foreseeable future.
Well, as more and more participants have been dropping out of the running for the PGA Tour, can we expect that the golfing season will remain competitive, or will this season be less eventful in comparison to previous years?
That's a good question, and it's tough to know yet. I mean, it's certainly, I would imagine, will have an impact. I mean, a player like Brooks Koepka, who's one of the best in the sport, 4th in the world, if he's not playing in a tournament, that's a big deal. These other names, not as big. Webb Simpson, sort of a semi-big name. Graham McDowell really hasn't been a factor for a while at this point. But Brooks Koepka is a big deal. A player like him not playing in a tournament, that matters. Novak Djokovic not playing in a tournament. In tennis, that matters. There's been some basketball players who have already said they're not going to do the NBA campaign in Orlando. So that will definitely affect the competitive balance of these leagues and these sports. But I think all of these different leagues are mostly concerned about money. And if they can make their money and keep their players as safe as possible, if they have to lose some of that competitive balance, I think they'd make that trade as long as the dollars and cents keep coming in.
Well, thank you so much, John, for updating us with your insight. I'm sure that this is not the last that we'll be hearing of this current story, along with a lot of other sports stories relating to information of COVID-19 possible exposures. To stay updated on this news story, follow @Time for Catch Up for more information. Recently, Disneyland Resorts of Southern California will not open on July 17th, as previously announced, due to a recent petition to delay its initial opening. Disney said late Thursday that it has, quote, delayed the planned reopening of Disneyland and California Adventure and on-site hotels because the state of California has said it has not issued reopening protocols until after July 4th.
Disney has not set a new opening date yet for the public, stating that a new date will be announced once it has a clear understanding, quote, of the set guidelines released for the state of California.
In addition, the labor union declared an opposition to the July 17th reopening date, of which played a heavily role in the decision to delay the already announced reopening of the resorts and hotels. Disney stated that they have continued to collaborate with the labor unions as they will move forward with the reopening of downtown Disney District planned for July 9th.
William Roddy Bryan, Gregory McMichael, and Travis McMichael were indicted by a grand jury yesterday in the case of the death of Ahmaud Arbery on 9 counts, including malice murder, felony murder, and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. Here to discuss more is Catch Up News correspondent Nikwa Osonye. Thank you for joining us today on Catch Up.
Thanks for having me.
Over the course of this past month, the world has been watching this case very closely, especially with the recent Black Lives Matter movement at the forefront of today's media. How has the murder of Mr. Arbery spoken to the world as a conscious effort to provide justice for those who have been betrayed by racial injustices such like root of this case?
Well, unfortunately, it still seems to be singing the same song of "we won't do anything about it." The reason particularly why this case is being watched closely is because it really resembles, in one way or another, the case of Trayvon Martin, who died at the hands of George Zimmerman over 6 years ago. I think that the world in general is waiting to see whether or not the American justice system will actually do what it was built to do, at least in terms of there being video evidence and other ways to affirm that a man's life was wrongfully taken. Anything racial that's added is just adding fuel to the fire.
So as the Black community continues to seek justice, such like many other communities of people of color, for injustices that have been put upon for people for generations, do you think the outcome of this case will speak volume as a way to further education and advocacy efforts of the systematic racism oppressed to the Black community?
Well, education really only works if the intended audience really wants to clue into it. So I'm not entirely sure that this case would serve as an education point. I will say that it might provide some credence to the idea that maybe America will provide justice for other Black, brown, and other communities of color, because to this point, that system has failed them miserably.
Of which I hope that we'll continue to see justice occur as we progress within this movement, and of course, advocacy on these efforts as well. Thank you for chatting with us today.
My pleasure.
A senior home in Brazil makes life just a little bit easier during this difficult pandemic with a creative twist to connect loved ones with their elders through a hug tunnel.
For 28 senior living residents, whom have been in isolation since March 17th at the Três Figueiras home in Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, Mother's Day came and without any residents to see their loved ones, of which loving staff saw spirits at an all-time low.
In an effort to lift their residents' spirits, staff members found a unique way to show compassion with a thick plastic sheet and 4 plastic armholes to make what the staff calls the hug tunnel. Thanks for catching up on today's news with us. I'm Madeline Cum.
And I'm Catherine Smith. Please make sure to catch up with us again on Monday.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
We appreciate you listening to Catch Up. For even more content, follow Catch Up Digital on social media. Just search for @TimeForCatchup.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories we covered today. Just use the hashtag #PassTheCatchup on social media.
Catch Up is an official production of Public House Media.